sure it counts. I'm sure I could pay for a fucking beer. You go to a bar and watch a game without paying for a fucking beer.
You can't drink beer.
I'm sick of being a bitch. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of being a little fucking sick goddamn get it done. I'm gonna watch a fucking present.
I'm recording right now. I was just gonna read more of this book because I thought it was interesting. Because I got to that one part of the book I thought was a very good point that I didn't even know that what's his name? Lincoln was against the Confederates. But I already knew he was, so but then he wanted to strip them of all their property and all their money and stuff. So whatever about him. Don't they give you the score like online? Go to Round Table. Don't they have a diner? The dine-in?
They don't have dine-in.
I thought they did. I thought you said the last time you were over there was people in there eating in there. You could probably get a personal pizza, I guess. I said you can probably afford like a personal pizza from Round Table. You could probably get one of those, and then you'd be able to watch their TV. Why don't you call Round Table right now and ask them if they're playing the Fresno State game on their TV?
They gotta buy a beer and fucking.
Don't buy beer. Buy soda. You don't have to drink alcohol. You can drink soda. You're not obligated to drink alcohol. Yeah, you can drink. You can get like a small personal pizza. You have enough to get that, don't you? That way you're a paying customer. Plus, you don't have to worry about bar people bugging you. Like bar women bothering you. Because you go in a bar, like you told me, you go in a bar, you're sending the wrong message. So if you go to a pizza joint, you're probably not going to get likely as bothered by a floozy, right? On a Friday night, you just go to a regular pizza joint. No one's going to mess with you.
No, I'm gonna get probably fucked with by a bunch of bitches.
Not at a pizza joint. Not if you just order a small pizza.
I want to watch my favorite team.
Well, then call Round Table and ask them if they're playing the game on one of their TVs. They had like, how many TVs they have in there? Like four screens in there. Ask them if they're playing the game on one of the TVs. And if they are, then you can go get a small pizza and whatever, and milk it. If you're that desperate to watch the game and you want to watch it really bad, spare the money. He wants to go to a Fresno State game. Or not actually to the game, but to a place playing the game. Whatever. Yeah, just do that. You got enough money on your card. You can probably get like a small pizza. Right?
No lie.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything. I said you can get a small pizza and a drink.
Don't worry about a pizza.
Or whatever. Just so it looks like you're not just milking it. I would say go to Round Table. They have game screens on the wall. Unless you can think of some other place that has screens with TVs on them. I guess you have to go to a sports bar. Those have TV screens. If you're that desperate, go ahead. If you're going to be upset because you can't see the Fresno game, and you feel like you're getting screwed over, then go watch it. I know, you're being deprived of everything you once knew. Even though we live in California. Yeah. Oh, you only eat Round Table pizza? Yeah, that's Nick's favorite too. He loves Round Table pizza. His favorite. We used to work at Round Table, so we know exactly what the ingredients are of Round Table pizza. I don't desire to work there again, so I'm good on that. So I got 5 people watching, and I know it's uh, Tin TV and Josie Wales helping me out, so my channel doesn't fall flat like a pancake. But see, I'm back into this book. Yeah, go ahead and have a good time. You could take Nicholas with you if he really wants to go, I guess. Wants to help you or wants to watch it, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, just whatever. Just spend it on gas, just spend it on that. This gas is like almost $5 a gallon here. So why not? Gotta burn the gas, right?
Yeah, but I can't. Well, that's having that one East Coast too. Sure.
Spend it on that. I know they're demasculating everybody, right? Where men don't want to watch stuff. They don't want to watch games anymore. Because they're turning everybody into Colin Kaepernick. You know, did you know Colin Kaepernick just wrote a children's book about racism? About how, what's being discriminated against. So he's a sick puppy is what he is. He doesn't even play football anymore. He's just a triggered little jerk. Just unwinding, having a beer, and getting ready to crash early tonight. I've got a lot to do tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's Saturday. There ain't much going on here. Except for the Oakland Hills, I guess. There was a fire. Those fancy houses on the hill were burning. Some of them got scorched pretty bad. And the weird thing is, the fire is mostly put out over there, but they're making people stay evacuated till 5 o'clock tomorrow night. I thought that was kind of excessive, making them stay evacuated that long. I'm like, that's kind of rude. I mean, if they got the fire mostly out, but then they're like, well, the wind's going to pick up, and if those eucalyptus trees are still heated up, they could explode and cause the fire to reignite on the hill. So they want people to stay away till 5 o'clock tomorrow night. And I would still sneak back in. I would just like put on my hiking boots and I'd hike in and jump over the fence. I'd still come back. I'm like, you're going to keep me out of my house? Because then you can send your buddies in the back door and steal my crap while I'm not home? Hell no. I'm not going to leave my house unattended. I'm like, if there's a fire, I'll turn my hose on. That's why I get charged, $200 a month for water. So I can turn my hose on. I wouldn't let them do that to me. Be like, I don't see any fire. There ain't no flames. I'm going home. And you know what? You may not see my car come up the drive because you guys have blocked the roads. But I'm going to be putting on my hiking boots and I'm going to scale the fence lines. I'd come back into my property. I got my keys and stuff. I'd come right back in. I'd turn my lights off so they couldn't see my house lit up. And I'd just lay down. I'd hunker down until everybody left. I did that when I was here. I didn't follow the rule. And I just stayed inside. And we turned lights off.
You tie your shoes.
And, I mean, yeah, my car was in the parking space, but, what are they going to do? The fire department, they'll knock on your door or whatever, but you don't have to leave. Or are they going to kick your door in and say, I demand that you get out of here so you don't turn into a crispy critter? It's like, no, I'm good. If I'm a crispy critter, then you can just use me in the next Poltergeist movie. My bones. But speaking of which, did you know that they used real human skeletons for the movie Poltergeist? That one scene with the swimming pool? Those were real dead bodies, by the way, which is really disgusting, Like you're looking at that scene in the movie and there's like all those dead people floating around in the pool, all those coffins and stuff. And they're like, oh, by the way, those are real dead bodies. Like, ew. As I think they said Spielberg bought those skeletons from it was like a lab where a medical school where they experimented on cadavers, I guess. So he bought those skeletons from them. And then he used it in the movie. And obviously they look really real and it's really disgusting. Isn't that gross? It's like, ew. It's like my aunt donated her body to science and then she ended up in Poltergeist as a half decomposed old lady in a coffin. You're like, ew. It's like, I'm so proud of my aunt. That's so awesome, right? That she's like a dead corpse in Poltergeist, and her clothes are hanging off of her like ripped, shredded tatters. Like um, that Thriller video with Michael Jackson. It's like, ew. Did you know in certain parts of Mexico, you probably already know this, they dig up their people every year. They dig them up on Hallows Eve. They dig them up and then they redress them, like they put new clothes on them on their body. They dig them up every year, and then they after the ceremony on Halloween, then the next morning they put them back into the grave. But it's disgusting. That's hella morbid, but I guess they're really morbid. I don't know if all people in Mexico do that, but I've seen a documentary where some of them actually do that, and I think it's to some degree it's sacrilegious to do that, to disturb somebody's rest. Once they're dead, you should just leave them be. Just remember them the way they were, not what they are now, which is not recognizable. Can you imagine somebody digging you up like a year later? Oh, it's like I wouldn't want somebody seeing me like that. I just want them to remember me when I was alive, not like that. It's disgusting. Yeah, it's Day of the Dead. Exactly. Yeah, so Nick is going to go see a Fresno. He wants to go watch the Fresno State game. It's football. Fresno, California is kind of a dump. There was this terrible story too. I read it this morning. This Chinese family were going to bed. Right, it was on Thursday night, and they were going to bed. And as their two daughters were going to bed, this guy was running from the police, I guess, because they suspected him of gang activity. And they did a chase. They chased him down. The chase only lasted about a minute, and he crashed through the bedroom and he killed the two girls. The two girls got killed in the back bedroom because his car crashed right through the bedroom wall, killed both girls. And the guy was crying, bawling his eyes out and everything, and he just didn't know what to do. It was so awful. His two daughters were killed when because they heard the explosion, and the two kids were killed. And it's just sick. They said there people were like, well, maybe the police should stop doing these high speed chases, in these residential areas, because what happens if you drive over 100 miles an hour through a residential area and you're running from the police? Chances are you're probably going to crash through their fencing into their house as you're trying to speed out. So they were saying the police are just as responsible as the criminal is for getting those people killed. So it's kind of a gray area, you know what I mean? Is it like the police should weigh it out, say, is it worth it chasing the guy through a residential area and causing a deadly accident like that, and they said 40% of the people killed in those chases are innocent bystanders because they get hit by the car or they get whatever, like that. The house crashed to the house and they get killed. Someone gets killed. Yeah, it's just weird. Donde el baño de muerte in English. Where's the bathroom of the dead? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's really morbid, isn't it? When you think about it, it's like, can you imagine digging up like your family members? Oh, that's just so weird. It's like, just leave them alone. They're sleeping. Their soul is resting. Just leave them be. Because when Jesus comes back, their soul is going to go up to God. They're going to go up to heaven with God. So just leave them be. Leave these people alone. I wouldn't want to be disturbed either. I'd be like, my ghost would be pissed. Like, no. And by the way, I didn't want to be buried there, but why did you do that? Because all you're doing is disturbing their rest. It's creepy, yeah. It's like, oh, um you want to dig up that little girl from Poltergeist and see what she looks like? She's like she's been dead since the 90s. Like, do you want to see what she looks like? Probably not. She's probably bones now. They say I did the research on it and they say it takes about 10 years for a dead body to become bones underground. About 10 years and then they're a skeleton. Unless it's uncorrupted. And there's been cases of that where they've exhumed bodies out of the ground or caskets out of the ground because what happens is the grave sinks in because they didn't, back in the old days, they didn't used to, what do they call that, where they encased it in concrete. Now they do. Now they encase it in concrete to where it's not going to sink in and cave in where the coffin caves in, the ground caves the coffin in, and then it sinks it in, and then they have to dig it up and redig it or redo it. Then they have to put it inside of an encasement. I don't know what it's called. There's like a word for it. I can't remember. It's like a concrete um, uh, holder that they put it in. They put a concrete cover on top of it. Once they lower it down, they put the concrete on top. And then that way it doesn't cave in. The ground doesn't cave in. So that's how they found out that there were bodies that were uncorrupted, because the grave caved in and the little person or whatever or adult had been buried for over 100 years, and they dug it up to try to redig it. And when they opened up the lid on the coffin, the body was uncorrupted. Like, it did not decompose, and they'd been in the ground for 100 years. And it was weird, you know. Carol Ann, eat some food, honey. You're getting skinny. Right. Oh my God. That's so sad, isn't it? Poor little thing. I hear she's lost a lot of weight. Yeah, little Carol Ann, right? She was born in 1975. So she's the same age as me. If she was alive, she'd be the same age as me. But they said what she died from was her I guess she had colitis or something, and her intestine bursted in her gut, something like that. And they didn't know it. They didn't know what was wrong with her. They gave her like medicine for Crohn's or something, and it didn't do any good. It didn't change. It didn't help her. Like, her intestine exploded. And some people theorize that somebody caused that to happen, but that's just no here nor there. Because everybody always talks about it, you know, when people talk about that girl, that poor girl, and they talk about the curse of poltergeist. Because the oldest daughter in that movie, she got murdered by her boyfriend. Like, her boyfriend at the time murdered her. She was breaking up with him, and then he confronted her out in the driveway, and he ended up strangling her to death. So, and then the little Carol Ann, you know, obviously her intestine exploded. So I don't know if that's considered a curse, but it sucks, right? It kind of ruined the franchise after that. Can you imagine her doing, if she didn't die and she was doing They're Here as an adult? Maybe not. She just wasn't meant to be long on this earth. You know, she died before she got corrupted and became not innocent anymore, because that's what Hollywood does. It corrupts these poor girls. Look at, what's her name? The girl from E.T., Drew Barrymore. She would have probably become like her, like Drew Barrymore. She probably would have became just like her, to where the innocence of her would be gone. No more innocent, beautiful girl. Just gone. Just saying, right? So I'm looking at this book still. I don't know if I want to read it, because it might be too incredibly boring, right? I could go to November 1860. It says Tuesday, November 6th. Just like it's coming up right now, right? Closer and closer. Lincoln elected president. The election of 1860, probably the most momentous in the nation's history, laid bare the bitter division between North and South that had been festering for more than a decade. In a four-way contest, Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate who opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories, won less than a majority of the popular vote, but 59% of the Electoral College, thus becoming the nation's 16th president. The North-South split was so decisive that Lincoln did not receive a single electoral vote from the South. Yeah. Which lined up solidly behind the pro-slavery candidate John C. Breckinridge of Kentucky, James Buchanan's vice president and a leader of the southern wing of the Democratic Party. Illinois Senator Stephen A. Douglas ran as a candidate of the Northern Democrats. Following a sectional split at the party's national convention, Lincoln's election pleased most Northerners, but not radical abolitionists, who criticized him for being a fence-sitter on the issue of slavery, and not Democrats, who thought him too radical. Meanwhile, in the South, whites vilified Lincoln and saw his election as nothing less than the Republic's death knell. These accounts from abolitionist Wendell Phillips, from Horace Greeley, the Republican editor of the New York Tribune, and from the Atlantic Confederacy, give an indication of the enormous breadth of opinion. If the Telegraph speaks truth, for the first time in our history, the slave has chosen President of the United States, not an abolitionist, hardly an anti-slavery man. Mr. Lincoln consents to represent an anti-slavery idea, a pawn on the political chessboard. His value, his position. With fair effort, we may soon charge him for knight, bishop, or queen. Abraham Lincoln illustrates the Republican Party's position and enforces our argument. His career proves our doctrine sound. He is republicanism. He is republicanism embodied. He is republicanism embodied and exemplified. Born in the very humblest Whig stratum of society, reared in poverty, earning his own livelihood from a tender age by the rudest and least recompensed, I can't even read that, labor, picking up his education as he might by the evening firelight of a rude log cabin, and so gradually working his way upward to knowledge, capacity, esteem, influence, competence. His life is an invincible attestation of the superiority of free society, as his election will be its crowning triumph. Oh, Poop 2 isn't able to count. Oh, it shows only 2 watching. Of course it does. It always does. Yeah, you're still here. Thank you for sticking around, Scuttle and Legends of Josie Wales. Thank you. See, it's just Lincoln. Let the consequences be what they may, whether the Potomac is crimson in human gore, and Pennsylvania Avenue is paved 10 fathoms deep with mangled bodies, or whether the last vestige of liberty is swept from the face of the American continent, the South will never submit to such humiliation and degradation as the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. In the speech of the Georgia legislature delivered immediately after Lincoln's election, Robert Toombs, a future Confederate cabinet member and general at Antietam, encapsulated the South's perception of Lincoln and the Republican Party. The instant the government was organized at the very first Congress, the Northern states I can't even read that. Oh wait, I'm going to read that again. The instant the government was organized at the very first Congress, the Northern states evinced a general desire and purpose to use it for their own benefit and to pervert its powers for sectional advantage, and they have steadily pursued that policy to this day. Our property has been stolen, our people murdered. Felons and assassins have found sanctuary in the arms of the party which elected Mr. Lincoln. The executive power, the last bulwark of the Constitution to defend us against these enemies of the Constitution, has been swept away, and we now stand without a shield, with bare bosoms presented to our enemies, and we demand at your hands the sword for our defense. And if you will not give it to us, we will take it by the divine right of self-defense, which governments neither give nor can take away. Therefore, redress for past and present wrongs demands resistance to the rule of Lincoln and his abolition horde over us. He comes at their head to shield and protect them in the perpetration of these outrages upon us. And, what is more, he comes at their head to aid them in consummating their avowed purposes by the power of the federal government. Their main purpose, as indicated by their acts of hostility to slavery, it is final and total abolition. His party declare it. Their acts prove it. There you go, huh? December 1860. Monday, December 17th. Okay. Let them go. All right. On the day that South Carolina began formal considerations of its secession from the Union, Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Tribune, in in a powerful Republican opinion shaper, published this editorial, which echoed the feelings of many many Northerners, not Southerners. Although Greeley had supported Lincoln during the election, he argued now that if the Northern states did not allow the South to succeed, they would be violating the Jefferson principle that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Greeley would later change his mind on this issue, but his editorial, published as the situation approached its most critical stage, demonstrates the wide range of views in the North as to what should be done. If 7 or 8 contiguous states shall present themselves authentically at Washington, saying, "We hate the federal union, we have withdrawn from it. We give you the choice between acquiescing in our secession and arranging amicably all incidental questions on the one hand and attempting to subdue us on the other. We could not stand up for coercion, for subjection, for we do not think it would be just. We hold the right of self-government sacred, even when invoked in behalf of those who deny it to others. So much for the question of principle. Now is the matter of policy. South Carolina will certainly succeed. Several other cotton states will probably follow her example. The border states are evidently reluctant to do likewise. South Carolina has grossly insulated them by her dictatorial, reckless course. What she expects and desires in a clash of arms with the federal government, which will at once commend her to the sympathy and cooperation of every slave state, and to the sympathy, at least, of the pro-slavery minority in the free states. It is not difficult to see that this would speedily work a political revolution, which would restore to slavery all, and more than all, it has lost by the canvass of 1860. We want to obviate this. We would expose the seceders to odium as disunionists, not commend them to pity as the gallant, though mistaken, upholders of the rights of their section in an unequal military conflict. We fully realize that the dilemma of the incoming administration will be a critical one. It must endeavor to uphold and enforce the laws, as well as against rebellious slaveholders as fugitive slaves. The new president must fulfill the obligations assumed in his inauguration oath, no matter how shamefully his predecessor may have defied them. We fear the Southern madness may precipitate a bloody collision that all must deplore. But if ever 7 or 8 states send agents to Washington to say, "We want to get out of the Union," we shall feel constrained by our devotion to human liberty to say, "Let them go," and we do not see how we could take the other side without coming in direct conflict with those rights of man which we hold paramount to all political arrangements, however convenient and advantageous. Okay. I didn't get the notification until 3 hours late last night. Oh, yeah, that's what they do, right? Yeah, they always do that. The Crittenden Compromise. In one of the last legislative attempts to avert war, Kentucky Senator John Crittenden introduced a compromise measure that would draw a line between North and South. Slavery would be outlawed to the north of this line and permitted to the South. In addition, under Crittenden's proposed constitutional amendment exerted below, newly admitted states would be free to decide the contentious slavery question for themselves. A joint resolution proposing certain amendments to the Constitution of the United States. Whereas serious and alarming dissensions have arisen between the northern and southern states concerning the rights and security of the rights of the slaveholding states, and especially their right in the common territory of the United States. And whereas it is eminently desirable and proper that these dissensions, which now threaten the very existence of this union, should be permanently quieted and settled by constitutional provisions, which shall do equal justice to all sections, and thereby restore to all people that peace and goodwill which ought to prevail between all citizens of the United States. Therefore, Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of both houses concurring, that the following articles be and hereby proposed and submitted as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of said Constitution, when ratified by conventions of 3/4 of the several states. Article 1. In all the territory of the United States now held, or the hereafter acquired, situate north of 36 degrees 30 minutes, slavery or involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, is prohibited while such territory shall remain under territorial government. In all the territory south of said line of latitude, slavery of the African race is hereby recognized as existing and shall not be interfered with by Congress, but shall be protected as property by all the departments of the territorial government during its continuance. And when any territory north or south of said line, within such boundaries as Congress may prescribe, shall contain the population requisite for a member of Congress according to the then federal ratio of representation of the people of the United States, it shall, if its form of government be Republican, be admitted into the Union on an equal footing with the original states, with or without slavery, as the Constitution such new state may provide. Thanks. Oh, I'm going to jump out of chat, but I'll be listening. I have to rest my neck. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for watching, Scuttle. I know you never think somebody like me would read this, right? Congress shall have no power to abolish slavery in places under its exclusive jurisdiction, and situate within the limits of states that permit the holdings of slaves. Article 3. Congress shall have no power to abolish slavery within the District of Columbia, so long as it exists in the adjoining states of Virginia and Maryland, or either, nor without the consent of the inhabitants, nor without just compensation first made to such owners of slaves as do not consent to such abolishment. Nor shall Congress at any time prohibit officers of the federal government or members of Congress whose duties require them to be in said district from bringing with them their slaves and holding them as such during the time their duties may require them to remain there, and afterwards taking them from their district. Article 4. Congress shall have no power to prohibit or hinder the transportation of slaves from one state to another, or to a territory in which slaves are by law permitted to be held, whether that transportation be by land, navigable river, or by the sea. Article 5. That in addition to the provisions of the third paragraph of the second section of the fourth article of the Constitution of the United States, Congress shall have power to provide by law, and it shall be its duty to provide that the United States shall pay to the owner who shall apply for it the full value of its fugitive slave in all cases where the marshal or other officer duty it was to arrest said fugitive was prevented from so doing by violence or intimidation, or when after arrest said fugitive was rescued by force, and the owner thereby prevented and obstructed in the pursuit of his remedy for the recovery of his fugitive slave under the said clause of the Constitution and the laws made in its purpose thereof. And in all such cases, when the United States shall pay for such fugitive, they shall have the right, in their own name, to sue the county in which said violence, intimidation, or rescue was committed, and to recover from it, with interest and damages, the amount paid by them for said fugitive slave, and in the said county, after it has paid said amount to the United States, may, for its indemnity, sue and recover from the wrongdoers or rescuers by whom the owner was prevented from the recovery of his fugitive slave, in like manner as the owner himself might have sued and recovered. It's a mouthful, huh? Article 6. No future amendment of the Constitution shall affect the 5 presiding articles, nor the third paragraph of the second section of the first article of the Constitution, nor the third paragraph of the second section of the fourth article of said Constitution, and no amendment will be made to the Constitution which shall authorize or give to the Congress any powers to abolish or interfere with slavery in any of the states by whose law it is or may be allowed or permitted. Before the Crittenden Compromise was defeated in Congress on January 16th, the state of Tennessee passed a resolution supporting the effort. This editorial in the Nashville Republican Banner argued that while the sympathies of Tennessee were empathetically Southern, the state's overall goal should be to perpetuate the Union if all possible. This settlement can be agreed upon by the people of both sections without the sacrifice of principle or any material interest. It would be acceptable, we believe, to a majority of the people in the succeeding states, and the state of Tennessee could take no course better calculated to befriend and conserve the interests of those states than by maintaining such a position as will enable her, in conjunction with other southern states, to negotiate the adoption of this compromise with the North. That the sympathies of Tennessee are empathetically Southern, no one will deny. She will take no course in any event calculated to militate against the interests of the Southern sisters, but this question for her to decide, and it is a question upon which hangs her own and the destiny of the South and the Union, is what course is most judicious, most patriotic, and best calculated to conserve the interests of her Southern sisters, and if possible, preserve the Union. Upon this question, there is a difference of opinion. We should rejoice to see this difference of opinion reconciled or compromised, so that we might all move in solid phalanx and as a unit. It would add immensely to our influence in the crisis, and might indeed be the means of securing what, under existing circumstances, might not be attained in perpetuation of the government. Okay, it says Wednesday, December 19th, 1860. During the confusing winter of 1860, opinions varied as to the outcome of the national crisis. Some prominent thinkers still believed that war was avoidable. Others took a dimmer view. In this expert, written as Christmas 1860 approached, a Methodist newspaper in Ohio predicted that civil war loomed as a near certainty. The dissolution of this union cannot be a peaceful affair. Civil war is as certain to follow secession as darkness to follow going down of the sun. There are 1,000 things to precipitate it. We regret to say that, in our humble opinion, the dangers which threaten the union of these states are greater now than that of any former period in our history. It says Thursday, December 20th, 1860. Southern California, almost said Southern California. South Carolina succeeds. Always a hotbed of secessionist sentiment, South Carolina was the first of the Southern states to respond to Lincoln's election by formally withdrawing from the Union. After 3 days of discussion, the members of its secession convention found that they had little to debate. The vote on the following ordinance was 169 to 0. The revolution of 1860 has been initiated, rejoiced the Charleston Mercury. I guess that's a newspaper. I did this, said the staff at YouTube. Monkeys in control of YouTube. Yep. An ordinance to dissolve the union between the state of South Carolina and other states united with her under the compact entitled the Constitution of the United States of America. Okay, make sure I'm right. We, the people of the state of South Carolina, in convention assembled, do declare and ordain, it is hereby declared and ordained, that the ordinance adopted by us in convention on the 23rd day of May in the year of our Lord 1788, whereby the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified, and also all acts and parts of acts of the General Assembly of the state ratifying amendments of the said Constitution are hereby repealed, and that the Union now subsisting between South Carolina and other states under the name of the United States of America is hereby dissolved. Thursday, December 27th, 1860. In the North, in addition to the Let Them Go faction, there was another group that wanted to negotiate with those southern states, moving closer to secession. Its argument in favor of conciliation, as reflected in this Philadelphia Press editorial, was based on economics. Because of the heavy trade between northern and southern states, the reasoning went. Both sides had a strong economic incentive to maintain the Union. Therefore, the North should press for a diplomatic solution. But the North has a vital interest in the preservation of the Union on its own account. The well being of our millions of men and women is not to be endangered or thrown away upon a sentiment of doubtful philanthropy, to result in a state of things which can do no good in any way to the objects for which the sacrifice is made. Our trade with the slaveholding states is much greater than it's commonly thought. Every man is business, and every laborer depending upon full employment for his daily bread, now feels the mischief which a temporary suspension of trade and credit between the sections has the power to inflict upon him. In 1859, we exported to foreign countries 34 millions worth of manufactured commodities, which would leave 1966 millions worth that must find a home under market and home consumption. If the South supplies herself with only 1/10 of this amount and consumes only 1/4 of them, she gives the northern states a market for those 296 millions of her manufacturers. We do not stop to inquire now how the balance of the agricultural exchanges stands between the sections. The northern farmer has his share of his trade in manufacturers of which are now speaking and participates largely in its profits and as largely in its losses and suspensions. It is enough that, without pretending to statistical accuracy, we show a market for our surplus manufacturers in the South 9 times larger than all the world besides affords us. The foreign exports of all the free states of every kind do not average more than 120 millions a year. Their sales to the southern states are more than twice that amount. The slave states' trade is of as great value annually to the free states of that of the Union is all to Europe, Asia, and South America. It is any wonder that our prosperity and our labor decline 25% in present value when so large a commerce as this is interrupted and the commercial confidence of the parties is shaken. And it says cotton bales awaiting shipment in Charleston, South Carolina. So it's a big bunch of cotton bales. Whew. It says January 1861, Sunday, January 6th. New York City, with its polyglot immigration population, tended to go its own way before and during the war. In an address to the City Council excerpted here, Mayor Fernando Wood proposed that the city should maintain economic ties with South Carolina and any other states that followed South Carolina out of the Union. Not only did Wood support the right of the southern states to succeed, but he also predicted that other parts of the country, such as California and even his own city, would set themselves up as independent republics. With our aggrieved brethren of the slave states, we have friendly relations and a common sympathy. We have not participated in the warfare upon their constitutional rights or their domestic institutions, while other portions of our state have unfortunately been imbued with the fanatical spirit which actuates a portion of the people of New England. The city of New York has unfalteringly preserved the integrity of its principles in adherence to the compromises of the Constitution and the equal rights of the people of all the states. We have respected the local interest of every section, and at no time oppressing, but all the while aiding in the development of resources of the whole country. Our ships have penetrated to every climb, and so have New York capital. Energy and enterprise found their way to every state, and indeed to almost every country and town of the American Union. If we have derived sustenance from the Union, so have we in return disseminated blessings for the common benefit of all. Therefore, New York has a right to expect and should endeavor to preserve a continuance of uninterrupted intercourse with every section. Intercourse. Yeah, thanks for watching, Josie. Thank you for supporting my channel. I'm just reading this and just trying to absorb it at the same time. Much, no doubt, can be said in favor of the justice and policy of a separation. It may be said that secession or revolution in any of the United States would be a subversion of all federal authority, and so far as the central government is concerned, the resolving of the community in its original elements, that if part of the states form new combinations and governments, other states may do the same. California and her sisters of the Pacific will no doubt set up an independent republic and her husband their own rich mineral resources. The western states, equally rich in cereals and other agricultural products, will probably do the same. Then it may be said, why should not New York City, instead of supporting by her contributions and revenue 2/3 of the expense of the United States, become also equally independent? As a free city, which but nominal duty on imports, her local government could be supported without taxation upon her people. Thus, we could live free from taxes and have cheap goods and nearly duty free. In this, she would have the whole and united support of the southern states, as well as all of the other states, to whose interests and rights under the Constitution she has always been true. It says the streets of New York City as they appeared shortly before the Civil War. So California wanted to join the southern states at first because they didn't want taxation, but then they gave in and everyone turned on the South. Taxation without representation. Wednesday, the 9th, January 9th, 1861. Star of the West fired upon. In one of the first acts of hostility between North and South, cadets of the Citadel, stationed on Morris Island outside Charleston Harbor, opened fire on the civilian ship Star of the West, which was bringing supplies to federal troops at Fort Sumter. Only one shot hit the ship. It caused no damage but considerable outrage among the officers at Fort Sumter. As the following letter from the fort's commander to South Carolina Governor F.W. Pickens makes clear. Sir, 2 of your batteries fired this morning upon an unarmed vessel bearing the flag of my government. As I have not been notified that war has been declared by South Carolina against the government of the United States, I cannot but think that this hostile act was committed without your sanction or authority. Under that hope, and that alone, did I refrain from opening fire on your batteries. I have the honor, therefore, respectfully to ask whether the above-mentioned act, one that I believe without a parallel in the history of our country or any other civilized government, was committed in obedience to your instructions, and to notify you, if it not be disclaimed, that I must regard it as an act of war, and that I shall not, after a reasonable time, for the return of my messenger, permit any vessels to pass within range of my fort. In order to save as far as it is in my power the shedding of blood, I beg that you will have due notification of this my decision given to all concerned. Hoping, however, that your answer may be such as will justify a further continuance of forbearance on my part, I have the honor to be very respectfully your obedient servant, Robert Anderson, Major 1st Artillery USA, commanding Fort Sumter, South Carolina. In his reply, Governor Pickens reveals the great distance that many Southerners have already placed between themselves and the United States government. Sir, your letter has been received. In it you make certain statements which very plainly show that you have not been fully informed by your government of the precise relations which now exist between it and the state of South Carolina. Official information has been communicated by the government of the United States that this political connection here, therefore, existing between the state of South Carolina and the states which were known as the United States had ceased, and that the state of South Carolina had resumed all the power it had delegated to the United States under the compact known as the Constitution of the United States, the right which the state of South Carolina possessed to change the political relations which it held with other states under the Constitution of the United States has been solemnly asserted by the people of this state in convention and now does not admit of discussion. The attempt to reinforce the troops now at Fort Sumter or to retake and resume possession of the forts within the waters of this state, which you abandoned after spiking the guns placed there and doing otherwise much damage, cannot be regarded by the authorities of this state as indicated of any purpose than the coercion of the state by armed force of the government. To repel such an attempt is too plainly its duty to allow it to be discussed. But while defending its waters, the authorities of the state have been careful so to conduct the affairs of the state. No act, however necessary for its defense, should lead to a useless waste of life. Under these circumstances, the Star of the West, it is understood, this morning attempted to enter the harbor with troops on board, and having been notified she could not enter, was fired into. The act is perfectly justified by me in regard to your threat, in regard to the vessels in the harbor. It is only necessary to say that you must judge of your own responsibilities. Your position in this harbor has been tolerated by the authorities of the state, and while the act of which you complain is in perfect consistency with the rights and duties of the state, it is not perceived how far the conduct which you propose to adopt can find a parallel in the history of any country, or be reconciled with any other purpose of your government than that of imposing this state the condition of a conquered province. F.W. Pickens, Governor. I guess. Okay, that's that. See, even California wanted to join the South because they didn't want taxation by the government. Increased taxes. Okay, Friday, January 18th, 1861. Death threats against Lincoln. Assassination threats dogged Abraham Lincoln from the moment he was elected president on November 6th until his inauguration on March 4th. Emotions ran higher with every passing day. By the date, this Lincoln supporter sent a letter of warning to the president-elect. 4 southern states had already voted to succeed, with Georgia to follow on the next day. Oh, thanks for listening, my One Ranch 307. Thanks for tuning in. I should just say to you this right now. I'm not sub to you. I'm definitely not stalking you. I'm Billy, known as a lot of other channels. I don't care about your boyfriend or anything else. Okay. No, as long as you don't mess with me, I don't care. If you just want to be a follower and you want to be cool, that's fine. I don't have any problem. Okay. Dear sir, I have heard several persons in this place say that if you ever did take the president chair, that you would go to Washington City expressly to kill you. For your wife and children's sake, don't take the chair. If you do, you will be murdered by some cowardly scoundrel. Have you had any application for this post? If not, I wish you would let me have it. If you take the chair as the President of the United States, but do not take it, resign. If you don't, you will be blah. I write you this as a friend, and I am a friend of yours. Please answer this letter so I know whether I must go to Washington City and raise a body of men to guard you. Yours truly, R.A. Hunt. January 20th, 1861. Jefferson Davis, once Franklin Pierce's Secretary of War and lately a U.S. Senator from Mississippi, was in many ways a moderate, counseling caution in the face of what he and most white Southerners considered unwarranted Yankee interference in their domestic institution of slavery. When the break finally came, however, Davis resigned his Senate seat and stood firmly with his secessionists. Here he writes to Pierce of his regret and of Caleb Cushing, a friend from their shared days in Pierce's cabinet. Dear friend, I have often and sadly turned my thoughts to you during the troublesome times through which we have been passing, and now I come to the hard task of announcing to you that the hour is at hand which closes my connection with the United States. For the independence of the Union for which my father bled, and in the service of which I have sought to emulate the example he set for my guidance. Mississippi, not as a matter of choice, but of necessity, has resolved to enter on the trial of succession. Those who have driven her to this alternative threaten to deprive. I can't even say that. Deprive her of the right to acquire that her government shall rest on the consent of the governed, to restitute or substitute foreign force for her domestic support, to reduce a state to the condition for which the colony rose. When Lincoln comes in, he will have but to continue in the path of his predecessor, to inaugurate a civil war and leave a soiled, distant Democratic administration responsible for the rest. General Cushing was here last week, and when we parted, it seemed like taking leave of a brother. I leave immediately for Mississippi, and know what may devolve upon me after my return. Civil war has only horror for me, but whatever circumstances demand shall be met as a duty, and I trust be so discharged that you will not be ashamed of your former connection or cease to be my friend. Do me a favor to write to me often. Address Hurricane P.O. Box, Warren County, Mississippi. May God bless you, is ever the prayer of your friend, Jefferson Davis. Okay, January 31st, 1861. Some of the most forceful arguments for the conciliation came from west of the Appalachian Mountains. Many northern cities in this region, such as Cincinnati, shared extensive commercial and kinship ties with the South and would be particularly affected by armed hostilities. The following editorial, published in the Columbus, Ohio Journal, The Crisis, outlined Cincinnati's historical dependence on Southern trade and predicted a sad fate for the city should the present difficulties lead to war. No great city in the West, and certainly no commercial point in Ohio, is so deeply and fearfully affected by our sectional difficulties as Cincinnati. She has been termed the Queen City, but if her river and Southern trade is cut off, she can be the Queen City no more. Her every interest is identified with the Southern trade, and such has been the fact since the first house was built within her corporate limits. When we first saw the city, it contained a population of 25,000, all told. She now numbers near 200,000, with 500,000 more outside her city. Government, identified with her trade and dependent upon her thrift and commercial prosperity. The disturbing elements now afflicting the country come home to her in a fearful volume. If these troubles are prosecuted to a bloody issue, Cincinnati will be converted into a camp of soldiers instead of a busy mart of peace and prosperous commerce. With the Ohio River only dividing her from a hostile foe, she will be exposed to the shell and the ball from the overlooking hills beyond. Fear and absolute safety would compel thousands to remove to a more distant point and give the city up to camp life and all the ills to follow. And for what are we to be driven to this desolate condition? Can anyone answer? As long as peace is preserved, we have everything to hope. When that is discarded, all hope of restoration of order and return to duty as a good citizen is lost in all reasonable calculation forever. Okay, that's as much as I'm going to read because I've been on here for a while. But I hope you enjoyed the book. It's just this book right here. But California almost joined the South, and so did New York. So to end taxation without representation, but then they ended up siding with the North. So and with Lincoln, whatever, dude. So, anyways, everybody, thanks for watching and appreciate you listening to my my book and what I said before that. So, good night, everybody.